Hi, I'm Dick Wagner. Did you know compromise can kill? Think about the hostage negotiator trying to convince a hostage taker that he should release his hostages. Suppose there are 4 hostages. In compromise, the hostage negotiator is not going to say, hey, I'll tell you what, why don't you release 2 of the hostages and then you can keep the other 2 and do with them whatever you want. Bottom line, a couple hostages are probably going to get killed. That's not ideal. Compromise is a very dangerous situation. Usually in compromise, somebody loses. And often in compromise, everybody loses. Think about getting up to go to work in the morning and you just can't decide whether or not you should wear black shoes or brown shoes, red shoes or blue shoes. It wouldn't make sense to wear one of each. It doesn't make sense to split the difference or compromise and wear one of each. When you split the difference, I'm going to go out and say this on a limb, somebody dies. Maybe it's not quite as serious as that, but certainly everybody loses. Everybody wants to be understood and accepted. And the very best way to be understood, for people to accept you and hear you, is by way of listening. Oddly enough, listening is the cheapest and easiest way to understand and let someone know that you accept them. The fact is, we're all preoccupied. Every one of us listening to this webinar have an awful lot on our plate. Many of us really barely have 45 minutes to sit and listen to this webinar. We're slammed. There are so many things for us to be doing that it's really, really difficult to focus on what we need to be focusing on. But when you're in the sales environment, you've got to focus on the negotiating process. And if you can't, you're not going to be listening and you're not going to help them feel that they are understood. Negotiation is simply communication with results. Too many times we think of negotiation as being some argumentative, back and forth, screaming, yelling, or strong words. The fact is, good negotiation is simply communication that ends with great results. Let's also be clear here. Negotiation is not browbeating. It's not coercion. It's not intimidation. Negotiation isn't about verbally beating them down so that they ultimately just throw their hands up, give up, and you win. Because when they do that, you really don't win. For those of you that have attended my classes, and many, many, many of you have, negotiation is actually the heart of my favorite term or phrase, and that is collaboration. Collaboration makes conflict meaningful when you're involved in the negotiation process. It makes it productive, and everyone benefits. My definition of collaboration isn't a win-win-win. My definition of a collaboration is that everybody gets what they want. And you might say, well, that's sort of the same thing. Not really, because too often in the collaboration process, salespeople think, all right, I'm going to work with this client. We're going to collaborate. We're going to put our heads together and come up with a solution. And usually the solution is splitting the difference. Hey, I can only pay $1,000 for this. And the salesman says, all right, I can accept 750. The fact of the matter is the salesman just lost. It isn't a win-win. If the salesman needs $1,000, then good collaboration and good negotiation means that you get your 1,000 and the customer feels good about and believes that the $1,000 was the right amount to pay. So the big question, how do we negotiate? I'm going to tell you over the next 20, 30 minutes a half dozen different key ideas in what negotiation should or could involve and how you can easily implement many of them. The very first one is an easy one. Be a mirror. Simple. How do you be a mirror? By doing the same thing, by reacting the same way, by making the other person feel that you're with them, you're following them, you're like them, you're hearing them. Being a mirror is kind of what birds do in a giant flock. When one turns to the left, they all turn to the left. Can you imagine a flock of 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 birds where every single one of them flew in a different direction? It wouldn't work out too good. What would happen? Yeah, they'd bang into each other, knock each other silly, and half of them would end up dead or on the ground, knocked out. So you've heard the saying, birds of a feather flock together. This picture is a perfect example of that. When the birds go left, they all go left. When the birds go right, they all go right. So mirroring is like imitation, but not patronizing imitation. Mirroring would include speech patterns, body language, vocabulary, the tempo of your speaking, even the tone of your voice, and yes, how we dress. Can you imagine calling on a banker, trying to sell them some service or program? The banker's sitting there in his dark blue suit with his white shirt and his red tie, and we walk in jeans and a tank top or jeans and a wife beater t-shirt. That is not mirroring, and you're not going to be given much credibility. If you're going to be calling on a banker, you probably ought to be dressed up to match that banker. If you're talking with a skateboard builder where he builds skateboards in his garage, I don't think you're going to walk in a blue suit and a red tie. You're going to walk in t-shirt and flip-flops almost, because that's how they're dressing. You've got to mirror your client or your customer or your prospect. Even in working with your children or your grandchildren, I do it often when my grandson is challenging me, and yes, they do. One of the things that you do is if they're yelling, you don't yell back. In traditional mirroring, you change the tone of your voice. You change the tempo of your voice. You lower it. And oddly enough, so will they. almost instantly they will react by mirroring you, because that's the natural thing for them to do. Folks, you see mirroring everywhere, and you've never even thought about it. You've never considered the effect of mirroring. But let's go around these pictures quickly. 3 ladies, probably mom, daughter, and granddaughter. They're all pictured there with their hands under their chins. Each one is mirroring the other. The guy and the girl jogging on the street. They're both jogging in the same tempo. Their arms are swinging at about the same speed and in synchronization. They're both smiling. That's mirroring. When one guy reaches his hand out to shake the other person's hand, the other person instinctively holds his hand out and shakes the other's hand. Here, even in an exercise environment, we're all synchronized. I said we all, believe me, I'm not doing that. But they're all synchronized. They're all doing basically the same thing, because that's a logical thing to do there. Exercise process wouldn't be very meaningful if everybody did something completely different. I've had my grandsons watch in the bathroom with me while I'm shaving. And you know what? They want a shaver. They want to shave too. They want to mirror what I'm doing. And so wherever practical and possible, I'll dig out another shaver and let them pretend they're shaving too. One time, one of them turned the shaver on, and he's busy shaving away, mirroring what I'm doing, except it wasn't quite mirroring. He shaved one of his eyebrows off. I'll tell you what, Mom wasn't too happy about that. So the big question, how do we negotiate? Well, we listen. We listen, and then we repeat back what we believe we heard. When you do that, the other person will feel that you hear them. They'll believe that you care. They'll be very, very convinced that you understand them, you get it. And importantly, they will feel that they are important to you. And that is an awesome position to be in the negotiation process. Listen and then repeat back. Folks, behind every mirroring attempt, you should have this in mind. You should have, please help me understand. That should be your thought process. When you're reacting and mirroring the way the other person is, you ought to be doing it ultimately subconsciously, but in your mind, you should be thinking and saying to yourself, help me understand what this person is saying. Help me be clear. Help them feel that I'm paying attention and that I really care. Folks, remember, negotiation is not an act of battle. It is not war with the other person. It's simply a process of discovery. The better you do at the negotiation process, the more you will discover about the client, their prospect, their concerns, or if you want to put it to practical use, the better you are at negotiation, even in working with your family, your wife, your children, your grandchildren. It ought to be a process of discovery. That's where the real value comes in. Now, another really cool aspect of the negotiation process is labeling. Labeling enables you to reinforce a really good aspect of the negotiation process. Labeling also can diffuse the bomb. It can diffuse that negative aspect with that client or person. It can diffuse and soften the situation. That's extremely valuable. And so how do you label? You label by starting your question or your comment with one of these three words: seems, sounds, looks. It seems like, it sounds like, or it looks like. When you start your sentence, your labeling with one of those three phrases, you have dramatically softened the concern or the inquiry or the question without turning it into an indictment. Examples of labeling that are negative, but oddly enough, even though they're negative, they're not a slap in the face. They're not a kick in the gut. When you need to label a negative, and maybe in this case you've been trying to present and sell a pre-disaster plan, you might start your labeling comment by saying, it seems like you don't feel the need to be prepared for a disaster. When you say that, it's not a slap in the face. They're going to stand up and take notice, but it's not an indictment. It sounds like you don't think a disaster can strike your facility. Really? It sounds like you don't think a disaster can strike your business? When you're saying it in the way that I just quoted it there, it sounds like it's not saying you believe that they think a disaster won't strike their facility. It puts it in the form of a question. It sounds like you don't think a disaster can really hit your business. Or it looks like you believe you are fully prepared for a disaster emergency in your company. None of those three sentences are a slap in the face. They're all pretty bold, but none of them crushes the other person. None of them is rude or obnoxious or offensive or likely to anger the other person. Also, it's not manipulative. It's not trickery. It's not inappropriate. You see, people have emotions on two different levels. Usually what we see is the presenting emotion. In other words, the emotion that is above the surface. It's the emotion that we see. It's the emotion that we hear. But very, very likely, and in almost every case, there is also an underlying emotion. And that underlying emotion is what motivates the behavior of that person. You see, they can say or do anything above the surface and make you think even that, oh yeah, this is awesome. But underlying below the surface, they might be really feeling, oh, how am I going to get rid of this salesperson? That's what's really motivating whatever the behavior is. So it's important that you remember, labeling negates or diffuses those tense issues. Labeling those negatives also de-escalates a potential confrontation, and labeling tends to expose the underlying issue or the underlying hesitation. What a great thing. It's almost as if it's mind reading. So when you use labeling, it's a great way to bring out of your client what their real underlying motivation is. Now I want to give you examples of labeling that are on the positive side. I'm going to rattle off 3 of them here. It looks like you recognize the importance of priority service. That's reinforcing. That's a positive that's strengthening their thought process. It seems like you value the mapping and the tagging of your building. When can we get that scheduled? It seems like you value. What a great way to positively reinforce their thought process. It sounds like you see the real worth of being part of this program. That's supportive. That's strengthening. That's reinforcing the sale and the sales process. Very, very positive. Remember, labeling neutralizes the negatives, and labeling reinforces the positives. In the case of labeling fears, kind of like shining the bright light on them, I'm going to give this example. My grandson, he's 5 years old. He's here at the house, sometimes in the evening, often not all the lights are on in the house. Maybe the hallway light, the bathroom light that they use is dark. There have been times when, for whatever reason, this little guy was scared to go into the bathroom because it was dark. When you label someone's fears and talk about them, it's the equivalent of flipping the light switch on. Suddenly those fears aren't as scary when you shine the bright light on them. He has no problem, my grandson has no problem going into the bathroom or down a dark hall as long as the lights are on, because they're not dark. It's not dark anymore. He's not afraid anymore. He is a bold and brave little boy. So don't be afraid to shine the light on, bring attention to, focus on what those fears might be that the other person is experiencing. Another one of my favorites is the accusation assessment. Don't let the 2 complicated words make you nervous. It simply means that you should state all of the bad things that could happen to the customer or to the client or the prospect or the family member you're talking about. State all of the bad things right up front. In other words, you know, as a salesperson calling on insurance agents over and over and over again, you know what their objections are always going to be. There are 4 or 5 or 6 standard objections that many insurance agents use on marketers when they come in the door. Since you know what those almost always are, bring them right up right at the beginning of the conversation. When you do that, it takes the wind out of the prospect's sails. It deflates the balloon. They suddenly don't have any defenses to argue against you with. So state of those potential objections or those bad things before the other person can bring them up. Say them before they even think they could happen. List those potential negatives boldly. Say what you know that they are thinking or what you know that they're going to say. When you get good at using accusation assessments, in other words, when you get good at identifying and saying out loud those things that very likely they are going to have as negatives or object to. You have diffused or softened any conversation after that point. Folks, get good at saying the bad things before they can say them. The cool thing about saying the bad things before you say them is that it takes away the defensiveness. When you ignore or when you fail to mention the negative right up front, it tends to give that negative issue credibility. It also tends to make the client have ammunition, and now you've got to respond to it. And when you respond to it, you're being defensive. So get rid of those potential negatives by bringing them right up, right out of the gate. Another aspect of the negotiation process, every one of us probably listening here has attended some sales training seminar. I've attended many. These go clear back to the 1970s and 80s and 90s. And sadly enough, many sales coaches today in the year, almost said 2020, but we're close, they're still teaching this goofy sales process of asking your customer a series of questions that they absolutely have to answer yes to. Because theoretically, are you having a great day? Yes. Do you think this is a good product? Yes. Would you like to buy this product? Yes. The concept is you get them into the rhythm of saying yes, and then automatically when you're asking them to buy, they're saying yes. Honey, would you like to go out to dinner? Yes. Honey, would you like to drive? Yes. Honey, would you like to go to Habaneros Mexican? No. Sometimes it is no. And so trying to get them to say yes, if that's where you wanted to go, that's not the right approach. Here's the problem. Many times when we hear the word yes, in reality, there are three potential situations, three potential types of yeses. Number one, the counterfeit yes. That's where everybody wants to say no, but they use yes to escape the situation. Are you interested in our services? Yes, we are. Could you leave me a business card and a brochure and then get back with me next week? They're giving you a yes, but the reality is they really mean no. It's counterfeit. And all they're doing is they're saying that yes or implying that yes just to escape you. A confirmation yes is a little more straightforward. A confirmation yes is simply reflective. Is it raining outside right now? Yes, that's a confirmation yes. It's a black and white answer to a black and white question. Is that your red car in the parking lot? Yes. It's straightforward. It's black and white. That's no problem. No issue with that particular kind of yes. The yes we're always are going for, of course, is the commitment yes. This is the one the salesman is always waiting for. Yes, let's do it. Yes, where do I sign? Yes, let's get this building mapped and tagged. Yes, I want to move forward with the program. That's the commitment yes. Confirmation yes is pretty simple, straightforward, But the one you've got to watch out for is that counterfeit answer. That counterfeit, yes, that bogus line of malarkey just to escape the situation. The reality is we should be trying to hear no. The reason is we already established yes can be a meaningless answer. Excuse me. It very likely is hiding deeper objections that you haven't unearthed yet. Well, maybe is an even worse word in my opinion. It's just lame. It's pathetic. It's wishy-washy. It doesn't tell you anything. And so there's nothing to gain. But when they say no, in every situation, it alters the conversation. Essentially, what it does is it takes the pressure off the client or the prospect so that they feel like, hey, I said no, he heard no, and so now I have this protective bubble around me that no salesperson can get through. And so once they feel they have a protective bubble, we are far as a prospect or a customer, we're more willing to engage in a conversation and talk about the issues and our feelings and concerns because we know we're protected. We already said no. So I like to think of when they give you a no, it's really the start of any meaningful conversation. No is often a decision to maintain status quo. Let's be clear about status quo. Status quo is whatever they're doing now. The insurance agent that is currently has status quo could be that they always refer another company, not yours. Status quo could mean that they always tell the client to call the 1-800 Claims Central number. Status quo could mean they just simply don't get involved in claims whatsoever. That's status quo. And so your challenge in any sales situation is to overcome status quo. And when you get them to say no, it enables you, or enables them rather, the ability to feel comfortable sharing with you what those potential concerns are. Change for everybody is scary. Change can often be complicated, and certainly change is out of their comfort zone. I have posted in the past at the Crest Network on Twitter and on our Crest Network Facebook page that if you aren't getting out of your comfort zone, you're not learning anything. If you're staying within your comfort zone, you're stuck in a rut. When people say no, it gives them protection from the scariness. So I really encourage you to rethink what the no actually means when your client or your prospect or that person that you are having a conversation with or trying to persuade, when you rethink the no and understand that it means maybe I'm not yet ready to agree with you. In other words, I got to think it through a little more. Or maybe their no is because I do not understand, or I can't afford it, or I need more information. And yet, even more so, we might have failed to ask if there will be someone else involved in the decision, and our failure to ask that right up front might mean that we get a no because someone else will be involved in the decision. So when you get good at encouraging them to and giving you a no as the answer, it gives them the feeling that they're in control. And if they feel they're in control, it feels safe. It feels safe to them, and they will likely be far more open with you. No has a lot of skills. No slows things down. No helps them feel safe and in control. No allows real issues to be brought out because they're safe. They've got that protective bubble around themselves. No protects people from making poor decisions. And for you salespeople listening, when you can get a no, believe it or not, it moves the sale forward. And yes, I'm going to say it, even if moving the sale forward means that there is not going to be any sale because they're not the right candidate. You've heard me say in previous webinars that not every client is an ideal client. And so maybe moving the sale forward is to move it forward to a point where you can say, okay, they're coming off my list. I want to move on to another prospect. Quit wasting my time with this one. A couple more little tidbits that I think are really valuable to you. In the sales process, in that negotiation, that conversation with your prospect or your client, when they use the term we or they, almost always it means that probably they are indeed the only decision maker. Yes, I will repeat that. We or they probably means that there is only one decision maker, and that would be them. When they use me or I, it's very likely that someone or others are behind the scene directing or controlling or making the ultimate decision. You say, well, why is that? The reason is we all have egos. We all can be arrogant. We all have a little pride. And when someone feels that they can convey that they're making the decision, they feel stronger, they feel powerful, they feel important. And so often they will use me or I when in fact it's really somebody else behind the scene. No rounding. How many of you have ever seen a car on a car dealer parking lot, dealership, with a price tag of a specific round number? You can, sale today, $50,000 for this brand new car. Nobody does that. Why? It's a psychological aspect. The price is never $5,000, $10,000, $8,000. It's never $2. It's $1.99. The price is $4,862.55. The reason that we don't round is because when we give a very specific price, the recipient of that price believes that we have sharpened our pencil, that we have considered and thought of every single contingency, every possibility, every angle. We've considered every option. We know every cost involved, and we've narrowed this down to a very exact dollar amount. When you specify, I've practiced this many times. When you practice or specify rather a specific dollar amount, their reaction is, oh, okay. There isn't this For example, I've also used in poorly and in the past a round number. Yeah, my fee is $5,000. Very rarely do they accept that. As you can imagine, and you've experienced it, how much are you charging? $5,000. Oh, would you consider $4,400 for this used car? We counter offer. We don't counter offer when we've nailed down a specific price. And then one of my favorites is the email magic. You're working with a client, a prospect. They've given you very positive feelings. They have indicated that, yes, they want to move forward because they agree with you that they do need a mapping and tagging of their building, that they do want to move forward with a pre-disaster program. And so you believe they're going to next week follow up with you to sign up to the prep program and get their building mapped and tagged and even a Matterport scan. And you can't get them on the phone. They won't respond to your email. You've left them numerous voicemails and they won't respond. You see, we figure that as salespeople, oh, this isn't going good. It's very likely that they've had second thoughts. They've got buyer's remorse. They've reconsidered. Someone got to them and they don't think they want to move forward like this. One of the perfect ways to get them off of the fence and get them to respond to you. I don't care if you do this in the form of a voicemail. I like to do it in the form of an email. And that is to simply say, hey, Bob, we've tried to reach you several times. Have you given up on this project? Question mark. End of comment. End of the email. Have you given up on this project? And send that. I have done this many times. Many of the salespeople that I work with and coach have used this, and it works like a charm. I just used it the other day, and the salesperson or the owner of the restoration company responded back, no, I want to move forward with this. Can we talk and finalize this on Monday? But he had not responded to my emails. He had not responded to my voicemails. I had even texted him, and he hadn't responded. But within a couple hours of sending that email, he responded and very positively. That concept, that email magic, really, really works. I'm Dick Wagner. You've been watching the Crest Network. And it's been negotiations like you've never considered. So please, folks, don't split the difference in your sales process. Thanks for watching. Talk to you next time.